Hey, 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 it's Mr. Bass, and it's September, Labor Day, and fall fishing is right around the corner. Now, September is kind of an interesting month. Obviously, whenever you're talking about the top baits, our country is so enormous, it's really hard to narrow down without talking about baits in the north, baits in the south, even baits in the middle part of the country. I'm just going to generalize this, and then hopefully you can adjust it to wherever you live in regards to what's going on in your type of part of the world. I'm in the middle. I'm in Arkansas. And here in Arkansas, water temps are still super hot. We're easily over 80 degrees pretty much everywhere. It's been a very, very hot summer. But the cooling trend is starting to happen. The nights are starting to get cooler. This is our first week where we've been in the 80s in the daytime, which is a sigh of relief compared to the 90s and hundreds that we've been dealing with for this summer. So what happens is as those days start to get shorter, the nights start to get cooler, the days start to get cooler, things start to change. It's a transition month. And you're going to hear that no matter how many of these videos you watch. Everybody's talking about September as a transition month. And what that means, more than anything, as far as the fisherman's concerned, is that the fish are going to be on the move. They're going to be scattered. You're going to have fish out deep. You're going to have fish super shallow. And then you're going to have fish in the middle. So what do you do? How do you nail these down? The key that I found is that you first and foremost look for some of these obvious signs. And the number one thing I look for as the temperatures start to cool is where are the bait fish. You know, in the lakes that I fish, there's a lot of shad usually. And where are those bait fish at? Because guaranteed the bass are going to be following those bait fish. So what this means, unless you can obviously go out and find them, which you can definitely find bait fish balls, you know, and schools of fish that are busting on that. But what it really boils down to is September is a search and destroy month. It's the month where I'm going to be throwing lots of moving baits, searching for those good fish. So with that said, let me show you what my favorites are for the month of September. So one interesting thing about these balls of shad, usually that you're going to be chasing or that I chase in my part of the world, is a lot of times they're not very big. They're small. And if you get too big on your baits when you're trying to match the hatch, it's not going to look natural. So you want to try to match the hatch as far as size, shape, color, that sort of thing goes. So usually what I'm doing is I'm throwing some sort of a smaller white lure. It doesn't mean that you can't throw big stuff, and sometimes, in fact, a lot of times it's said, you know, in the transition months, you either want to go really big or really small in regards to your lures. So what I'm going to be throwing, one of my favorites this time of year, is a whopper plopper or some sort of a plopper style bait. Normally my preferred topwater bait is a buzz bait, and buzz bait works great in the fall as well. But I don't know, I just got into fall time frame throwing the whopper plopper, and it seems to work quite well. So until I've located the fish and I'm really in that search mode, a whopper plopper is just a fantastic search bait. And I like this really white one. They also have kind of more of a bone colored one. I prefer this white one. It's got kind of pearlescent sides to it. You might be able to see that. And I believe that just creates a little more flash. It makes it look a little more lifelike. So after I've gone through the search piece there, once I've located the fish and maybe I got schools of bait fish and schools of bass underneath them, busting and that kind of thing, then I'm going to get a more localized or isolated topwater bait like a popper. This is what I'm going to work through those schools, and they're very, very effective. This is one of my favorites, popper by Yellow Magic, and the old Rico popper is also really, really cool. Now I have a little secret that I'm going to share with you that I don't think many people are using, that really, if the conditions are right, it's kind of lights out. And that is this pop shads by Z-Man. Now, if you notice, it looks much more lifelike than this does. By the way, I always have a feathered treble on my poppers to kind of help it look more shaddy and more lifelike. But if you're needing something that's more lifelike, more of a subtle presentation, in other words, if I'm throwing this loud popper in there and they don't seem to be hitting on it, I will go to this little Z-Man bait. And this thing it's got some very unique qualities. One, it's made out of Lastec, so it's super durable. One will last you all day long. But it has a popping cup. It's a shad style bait that is also a popper. And you have to rig this, and the way I found the best to rig it is with an EWG style hook. I won't get into the rigging, but if you don't rig this right, it is tricky. And the first time you get out and throw this, thing's going to frustrate you. But just spend a little bit of time, practice with it, and you can start getting the retrieve right. You can get the popping action right. And this little bad boy crushes them. Now, obviously, the hookup is not going to be nearly as good as far as a single EWG style hook in a big piece of soft plastic. Your hookup's much better with a couple of treble hooks. But this little guy works, and nobody else is throwing it. So keep that in mind. Okay, that's top water. Now, stepping down into the water column, I'm going to go with another search bait. Scattered fish, I'm covering water. And my very favorite way to cover water is with a bladed jig. That's right, a chatterbait. And in the fall, when the shad are really tiny, like I was saying, I've started going to this Minimax chatterbait. Now, there are a few downsides to the Minimax. The action in the Minimax is kind of, you throw it out there and it vibrates, but it pretty much comes back to you in a straight line. And if you're throwing into a school, busting on shad, that's probably fine. But if you're still in search mode, trying to find the fish, a lot of times I don't feel like the Minimax pattern is erratic enough, and I want to go back to the jackhammer or even the thunder cricket. So I'll show you a couple of those that I like to throw. Okay, here it is. This is the 3/8 ounce jackhammer. My go-to absolute, if I'm not throwing that Minimax or it's not working, this is my first choice. And I'm usually going to go with something white or something with a little pearl in it, but white is good. And really, this is pretty small. Now, what I will do as far as trailers go is I will put more of a flat-sided compact trailer on this in the fall. And part of the reason I want to do that is because if I put a flat-sided trailer on there that gives me some good kicking action, it also makes it fairly easy to keep it up high in the water column if necessary, or even helps me kind of burn it across the top. I really like the Yum Craw Chunk as a trailer for that jackhammer in the fall. Those tend to go together quite well. All right, but if you don't want to use a jackhammer, the other alternative that I like to throw out there is the thunder cricket. And I've just now kind of gotten into this gold series, and it's kind of fun. I really like the gold series. This color is called Pro Bone, and I think it is a sick color. And so they come with a gold blade. So sometimes, you know, depending upon the water clarity and the amount of cloud cover, I may break out this gold colored bladed jig. And then, of course, you can't go wrong with just white. Thunder cricket is one of my favorites. That's what I'm going to do. Bladed jig, jackhammer, Minimax chatterbait, or the thunder cricket. All right, now what if you don't have a lot of grass to throw that chatterbait around, and you've got more timber, which chatterbaits don't do very well around timber at all, and you've got a lot more cover in the area, or you've got more open water that you need to fish to try to find those fish. that's when I'm going to put the chatterbait down, put the bladed jig down, and I'm going to break out a crankbait. And what I generally like to start with is one of my favorites, the old tried and true 5XD from Strike King. It has a great noisemaker in it. It's very versatile though, because you can get a 5XD pretty deep if you need to, but you can also fish it shallow, and just depending upon the size of your line and the way you retrieve it, it's a very versatile bait to cover multiple depths in the water column. So if I'm not throwing that bladed jig, then I'm going to break out the 5XD. As far as colors go, it really depends upon water clarity, the forage, those kind of things. But these are a few of my favorites. This black back with chartreuse sides. This one here is a great one. It's pretty bright, so you know, this one I'm going to throw in dingier water. But again, it's an awesome go-to color that I throw a lot. And then if I want more of a shaddy looking bait, I'm going to go with something much more white. And this also does quite well. So the 5XD, that's going to be my choice. But really, any kind of a crankbait that you like, that you prefer, you ought to break it out and start throwing it this time of year. The great thing is that when the fish are scattered, you can cover so much water with a crankbait. Just get on your map and start finding those high percentage areas, you know, like the main lake points. And then if you're in one of those areas where the water's really cooling, you can start moving back into the creeks, into the secondary points. Where I'm at right now, it's still main lake point stuff, really, for the most part. But don't underestimate the crankbait. Okay, the interesting thing about fall fishing is that there's so many baits that you can work, that you can try, and that will work. So trying to narrow it down to 3 or 4 lures is a challenge for me. But I've got the top of the water column. I've dropped into the center of the water column, the middle. Now I'm going to go to the bottom. And really, when it comes, although that crankbait can be used as on the bottom, you know, they work great. Bouncing off the bottom, dredging on the bottom, that kind of thing. But there are times when massive searching and covering tons and tons of water isn't what's working. And you've got to target isolated cover. You got to start throwing at the stumps. You got to start throwing at the laydowns. You got to start identifying those very specific targets in the lake that you need to throw a very specific lure to. Something slow moving, you know. It could be a finesse bait, it could be a Ned rig, it could be a worm, it could be a lot of different things. But my choice is going to be the jig. And particularly the football jig is what I like to throw this time of year. So for me, it's not just about the jig, it's about the trailer you put on the jig as well. You may have heard me say at the beginning of the video that in the fall, this transition period, a lot of times you're going to throw small stuff like that Mini Max, but you also may want to throw big stuff. A lot of times it's one of the two. It's small or large, but it's not always something in the middle. So in order to make my jig bigger, more attractive, I'm going to focus on a big trailer, and this is what I like to use. So one of my favorite jigs is the Jewel Baits football jig. It is a beefy jig. It has a very wide head. It stands up really well in the water. It drags really well in the water column. It's a great hopping bait. And I also love their O'Shaughnessy Bend hook. It really does a great job of getting those fish in the roof of the mouth and really hanging on to them. It also comes with a band for rattles, and a lot of times I will put rattles on it. But when I combine the Jewel Baits football jig with the Cowboy, it's a beautiful thing. It is a nice, big, beefy presentation that gets a lot of attention. So check this out. I have not cut this thing down at all. So I've just put I've just put the full-size cowboy on there. Huge, giant, and it flat catches them. I tell you, it really, really attracts the fish. So, you know, as far as colors go, that really depends upon the lake you're on. I do like a little orange in the fall, and I don't know if there's science behind that or not, but for some reason, I've always like a little orange in the fall. And these big cowboys, give them a try. I don't think you'll be disappointed. So I've got to say, I'm very excited about fall fishing, and I'm very excited about these baits. If you're interested in getting into these baits, you can help the channel by clicking on the links in the description. I'll have ways that you can purchase all of these baits. My first choice is an Omnia Fishing, but there's other places, Amazon and other places, that you can help me out as well. I would greatly appreciate it if you would check that out if you're interested in any of these lures. I hope this was helpful and informative. I'd love to see in the comments what you like to throw in the fall in September. Please share that with me, share it with the audience, and share the video with someone. That would be greatly appreciated as well. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, happy fishing!